think we're,
There we go. Very good. Thank you. Very good. Mr. Clerk, I have roll call, please.
yes, sir. Mr. Callahan,
Here.
Mr. Sierra, Mr. Armstrong,
Here.
Mr. Oswald,
Here.
Mrs. Here, Mr. Stewart,
Here.
Mr. Schneider, Mrs. Davis, Mrs. Sawer, Mr. Lippian,
Present.
Mr. Tolet.
Here.
If we have one absence, I have an excuse here.
So moved.
Second by Ms. Mitchell. Is there any discussion? All those in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And carried. Public hearing.
You are hereby that will be held July 8th, 2020 p.m. to consider by tax estimated unencumbrances, balances, and revenues, and estimated expenditures of the City of Elyria, County of Ohio for the calendar fiscal 2025 will be on the beginning of Friday, June 1st, 2024, in the offices of the City Finance Director and the Clerk of Council, and will be available for public inspection by contacting the Finance or Council offices pursuant to the requirement of law. The proposed tax budget indicates the estimated revenues, estimated unencumbrances, balances, and estimated expenditures for the year 2025.
Are there any proponents? Finance Director Pulaski.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you know, every year we are required by the Ohio Revised Code to pass what is called the tax budget, and what is before you tonight is the 2025 tax budget. This kicks off basically the appropriation process for next year. It's a document that estimates amounts available to spend by fund type, and those fund types are the general fund, which is a type unto itself. Special revenue funds, we currently have 45 special revenue funds. One tax increment financing fund, which would be the Chestnut Commons Fund. 7 capital project funds, 2 debt service funds, 6 enterprise funds, which would be the business type activity funds, 2 internal service funds, 18 trust and custodial funds, and then we also have a fund for the Elyria Public Library, as we are a conduit issuer for their bonds, and their money flows through the county to us, to them. So basically, this document, I have to estimate cash in each fund at the end of April of this year, and estimate revenues moving forward for the remainder of this year, estimate remaining expenditures, and then coming up with a balance at the end of the year, beginning of 2025, and that becomes the amount that goes on the Certificate of Estimated Resources with the Lorain County Budget Commission. So this year, as I mentioned in Finance Committee, there are 2 funds that we're going to have to pay particular attention to. The general fund is starting with a very high cash balance, mainly because we've used American Rescue Plan Act monies to pay for certain general fund activities, and the other one being the Employees Health Insurance Fund. So starting in 2025, we have to move 30 police and 17 firefighters from the American Rescue Plan Act back into the general fund. That's about $5.8 million in payroll. So if you look at the top line of the budget, that's the general fund, you see that I've got cash estimated at $14.6 million at the beginning of 2025, and at the end of 2025, $10.6 million. So we're going to spend more than what we bring in, mainly because of these people being moved into the general fund. Hopefully, things will happen at the mall. We'll start collecting some more income tax revenue to cut into this deficit that we're moving into. The Employees Health Insurance Fund is an internal service fund. It's funded by 85% by the city, 15% by the employees. So everybody knows what's happening with health care costs. So going into 2025 without any funding changes to the fund, I've got us slipping into the red by the end of 2025 in the Employees Health Insurance Fund. So Upon your approval of this document, I'll submit it to the Lorraine County Budget Commission, and then at the end of 2024, beginning of 2025, I'll amend it to reflect actual cash available in each fund, and then the expenditure part of this will be removed whenever council passes the permanent appropriation, and those numbers will change based on the appropriation that you pass next year, probably in March, typically is when we do it. So if you have any questions, I'll answer them, but upon your approval, I'll submit it to Lorraine County Budget Commission.
Any
Thank you.
questions for the Finance Director, Mr. Tolet?
Only one, and I ask this every 2 months. Has there been any word from the state of Ohio on the additional PERS contribution for the city?
Yeah, not as of yet, so we're actually waiting to hear about, there's Ohio Public Employees Retirement System is talking about increasing the employer's share, and also the police pension fund is talking about increasing the employer's share. And the two of them together, the share that they're asking for is going to cost us an extra $2 million per year in payroll.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the Finance Director? Are there any other proponents? Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? Are there any opponents? Are there any opponents? I declare this public hearing has been held.
Sponsored by Finance, the matter of adopting the tax budget of the City of Elyria, Ohio for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2025, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Tolet?
I'm sorry, there'll be a roll call vote. Go ahead.
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed in its first reading under suspension of rules and declared an emergency.
Second.
Second by Ms. Davis.
Question.
Questions called. Roll call vote.
On the suspension, Mr. Callahan?
Aye.
Mr. Armstrong? Aye. Mr. Oswald?
Aye.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Aye.
Mr. Stewart?
Aye.
Mr. Schneider?
Aye.
Mrs. Davis?
Aye.
Mrs. Sawerka?
Aye.
Mr. Lippian?
Aye.
Mr. Tolet?
Aye.
10 ayes on the suspension. On the emergency, Mr. Callahan?
Aye.
Mr. Armstrong? Aye. Mr. Oswald?
Aye.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Aye.
Mr. Stewart?
Aye.
Mr. Schneider?
Aye.
Mrs. Davis?
Aye.
Mrs. Sawerka?
Aye.
Mr. Lippian?
Aye.
Mr. Tolet?
Aye.
10 ayes. On the passage, Mr. Callahan?
Aye.
Mr. Armstrong? Aye. Mr. Oswald?
Aye.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Aye.
Mr. Stewart?
Aye.
Mr. Schneider?
Aye.
Mrs. Davis?
Aye.
Mrs. Sawerka?
Aye.
Mr. Lippian?
Aye.
Mr. Tolet?
Aye.
10 ayes. Ordinance 2024-104. You are hereby notified that a public hearing will be held on Monday, July 8th, 2024 at 7 p.m. to consider the following. An ordinance amending Section 1131.02 codified ordinances of the City of Elyria, Ohio, known as the zoning ordinance, to rezone certain real property located at 1267 Lowell Street, Elyria, Ohio, from L-I Light Industrial District and H-I Heavy Industrial District to H-I Heavy Industrial District.
Are there any proponents? Welcome. Please come up, state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Ty Stewart with Liberty Development Company, 28045 Rainy Parkway in Westlake. So first of all, thank you for the attention you're giving this. We've been trying for several months now. We've been working through these issues with council and planning, and we need rezoning to comply with the city's requirement that there not be split zoning on an individual parcel. What we ultimately are trying to accomplish is a split and consolidation to consolidate about 82 acres that would be part of a donation going to Lorraine County Metro Parks with a conservation easement on them. And then there would be another consolidation that would consolidate another 3 or 4 parcels into a 23, 24-acre parcel, something like that, where the existing building is at 1301 Lowell Street, the old 3M building.
Yeah, I
And
know.
I'm happy to answer any questions.
No, we know it's been a little bit of a process, and we appreciate your patience. So does anybody have any questions in regards to what's been in front of us? Very good. Thank you for coming up. Are there any other proponents? Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Are there any opponents? Are there any opponents? I declare this public hearing has been held.
Sponsored by Community Development, an ordinance amending Section 1131.02 codified ordinances of the City of Elyria, Ohio, known as the zoning ordinance to rezone certain real property located at 1267 Lowell Street, Elyria, Ohio, from a L-I Light Industrial District and a H-I Heavy Industrial District to a H-I Heavy Industrial District.
Mr. Callahan.
Mr. President, I move that this ordinance be passed on its third reading.
Second by Ms. Mitchell. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2024-105. You are hereby notified that a public hearing will be held Monday, July 8th, 2024 at 7 p.m. to consider the following. An ordinance amending Section 1131.02 codified ordinances of the City of Elyria, Ohio, known as the zoning ordinance to rezone certain real property located at 1267 Lowell Street, Elyria, Ohio, from a R-MHL residential multi-household low-density district and L-I light industrial district to R-MHL residential multi-household low-density district.
Are there any proponents? Again, thank you. Please state your name and address for the record for this particular item here.
Ty Stewart, 28045 Rainey Parkway in Westlake. This is part of the same process that we just described. It's just dealing with a couple other different types of zoning that were on it, but it's all part of the same process.
Yeah, very good. Does anybody else have any questions? No. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Are there any other proponents? Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Are there any opponents? Are there any opponents? I declare this public hearing has been held.
Sponsored by Community Development, an ordinance amending Section 1131.02 codified ordinances of the City of Elyria, Ohio, known as the zoning ordinance to rezone certain real property located at 1267 Lowell Street, Elyria, Ohio, from a R-MHL residential multi-household low-density district and L-I light industrial district to a R-MHL residential multi-household low-density district.
Mr. Callahan?
Mr. President, I move that this ordinance be passed on its third reading.
Second by Ms. Mitchell. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2024-106. You are hereby notified that a public hearing will be held on Monday, July 8th, 2024 at 7 p.m. to consider the following. An ordinance amending Section 1131.02 codified ordinances of the City of Elyria, Ohio, known as the zoning ordinance to rezone certain real property located at 827 Cleveland Street, Elyria, Ohio, from a H-I heavy industrial district to a B-G business general district.
Are there any proponents? Welcome. Please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Mickey Mann, representing CS Plaza LLC. Address is 5050 Detroit Road, Sheffield Village, Ohio. We're asking for this rezone at 827 Cleveland Street from heavy industrial to business general to develop a proposed Big B drive-through coffee and do a remodel for a sit-down restaurant of the vacant former Burger King restaurant.
Thank you. Is there any questions for Mr. Mann? Very good. Thank you for coming up. Are there any other proponents? Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Are there any opponents? Are there any opponents? I declare this public hearing has been held.
Sponsored by Community Development, an ordinance amending Section 1131.02 Codified Ordinances of the City of Elyria, Ohio, known as the zoning ordinance to rezone certain real property located at 827 Cleveland Street, Elyria, Ohio, from a H-I Heavy Industrial District to a B-G Business General District.
Mr. Callahan,
Mr. President, I move that this ordinance be passed on its third reading.
Second.
second by Ms. Mitchell. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2024-107. You are hereby notified that a public hearing will be held on Monday, July 8th, 2024, at 7 p.m. to consider the following: an ordinance granting a conditional use permit pursuant to Chapter 1135 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Elyria, Ohio, to Cheryl Carter for a child care facility at real property located at 250 Winkle Street, Elyria, Ohio.
Are there any proponents? Are there any proponents? Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? Are there any opponents? Are there any opponents? I declare this public hearing has been held.
Sponsored by Community Development, an ordinance granting a conditional use permit pursuant to Chapter 1135 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Elyria, Ohio, to Cheryl Carter for a child care facility at real property located at 250 Winkle Street, Elyria, Ohio.
Mr. Callahan,
Mr. President, I move that this ordinance be passed on its third reading.
Second.
second by Ms. Mitchell. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2024-108. That's all the public hearings.
Can I get approval of the minutes? So moved. Moved by Mr. Schneider,
Second.
second by Ms. Mitchell. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Remarks and reports from city officials. Mayor Brubaker.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. First and foremost, this evening in the square, we were able to honor Mateo Medina for his accomplishments at the 2024 track state championships, where he won the 100, 200, and 400 meter, which ultimately led to him single-handedly winning the Division I state championship for the team. So we were able to honor them along with the Elyria City School District and his teammates and coaches. I want to thank the Elyria Fire Department. We used a ladder truck to bring him into the square, the Elyria Police Department for the escort, the Parks and Rec Department for getting the square ready, and also pulling the trailer, if you will, that was reconfigured by our Central Maintenance Complex to transport the team here this evening. The second thing was, last week we instituted a task force for the complaints for fireworks. And I asked Captain Welsh to put together some data for us so you can kind of understand what they're dealing with. We started this on the night of July 2nd, and through last night, we've had 183 calls for service for complaints of fireworks. Now, not all of those were in the time frame of the task force, which is basically starting at about 10 o'clock and going to 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, depending on the calls that come in. Of those, there were 19 citations/arrests issued. One of those, 18 of them were fireworks. One of them was for an aggravating menacing situation that was due to ongoing fireworks in one of our neighborhoods. On the ones that there was no enforcement taken, the officers that showed up were unable to find probable cause on whom, where, and what the fireworks were, or they had ended by the time they got there. But I will tell you, I will give kudos to those individuals that worked the task force, but also to Sergeant Walker, who has literally spoken to upwards of 200 residents, because he will park his cruiser in areas of complaint or areas of concern, and he will walk through the neighborhoods and actually talk to people, and prior to actually having to cite them, get them to stop doing what they're doing if in fact they were doing it, but he wasn't able to prove it. So kudos to Officer or Sergeant Walker. They will be out again tonight, except we have shifted the hours, or Captain Welsh has. They'll be started, actually they're on duty now between 6 and 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. The good news is Captain Welsh was able to manipulate the schedule a little bit, so it will have a huge reduction. There will be very little, if any, overtime on this. And the crew, or that task force will be out doing the same thing. So again, I would encourage residents to call the non-emergency line, not 911. The non-emergency line is 440-323-3302. The dispatcher will put that call into the queue and dispatch officers to the area. Please keep in mind that we do have the task force that is responding to these calls. Our standard officers are responding to other important high priority calls. Last night was a very extreme measure where there was an accident on 57, and all of our resources were detailed to that area. But the Lear Police Department, under Captain Welsh and Sergeant Walker, are doing a phenomenal job of this, and we will continue this through Saturday evening. If you have any questions, I'll take them.
Any questions for the mayor? Ms. Sawerka?
Thank you. I don't have a question, but I have a comment. I applaud the Brubaker administration and everyone working on this. I think we were way out in front. I think there was a lot of very good publicity on this. Elyria came out as someone that's enforcing rules and regulations, and I think the neighbors were very appreciative.
Anybody else? Mr. Lippian?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President, I want to echo what Ms. Zwierka said. I got a lot of calls from residents asking about this, and it's a relief to see that we're not just a city of laws, but we're also a city that respectfully enforces them and tries to do so in a manner that's the most humane to the residents. So I understand you were using drones, you were on the news, so kudos to creativity on that, and hopefully we get more compliance. It certainly seemed quieter this year than in previous years. So to my question, I had a question about the ambulance committee that we had set up and some of the review that's been done. Do we have a report yet from the audit done there? Because I understand there's a sticky wicket, someone hasn't been paying their income taxes, something like that.
I'm not, through you, Mr. Chairman, I am familiar with the situation at Life Care, but I don't know where their legal issues are in our wheelhouse, if you will. But we are aware of that situation.
Mr. Lippian?
Okay, thank you. And is there a report that you can yet submit to council that can kind of update us on where everything's at with the review process?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I send out a report. I planned on doing it this week as well, where we issue how many calls we have went to, how many calls we've paid for, and where we're currently at in the budget. As far as the future of ambulance in the city of Elyria, we have not begun that process. We talked about doing that as we got into the fall months.
You completed, Mr. Lippian? Okay. Any other questions for the mayor? All right, very good. Safety Service Director Pianowski.
Thank you, and through you. This Saturday is the Kerstetter 5K and 1 mile family walk this Saturday morning down by East Falls. Assistant Safety Service Director Jay Lesh and myself have been training painfully the last couple of months to get prepared for that. We want to get out there and support. So if you're available, I think they're probably still doing signups. They have a Facebook page. It'd be great to see as many people show up and support that event and our community. In addition to the fireworks at West Park, which went very well, and I give all the credit to Parks Director Carrie Reardon and her crew and the other city departments that participated in making that happen, which were many. There were a lot of people that contribute to the success there. I also want to recognize the crew that was there at West Park on Saturday morning at 6:30 in the morning to clean up. A fair amount of litter, firework debris, taking down the snow fencing that was meant for use for crowd control. So a great effort by our city workers to not only put the fireworks on, but also to clean up after the event. So I want to extend kudos to them and publicly recognize them and say thank you. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions for the director? Mr. Werka?
Thank you, through you. I think you had mentioned in the past that you were working on some information on recycling, so I wondered when we can expect something along those lines. And that's question number one. Number two is a comment. I've noticed, and I've sent them to Safety Service, an increased number of non-compliant either hoarding situations or property maintenance conditions, and I think that maybe we could talk amongst ourselves and maybe have a committee meeting that's maybe focused on that. I know I've sent over 2 or 3. I am appreciative of the removal of the one that was on Chestnut Ridge Road, but there are 2 others that are starting, and there's another one I know you're actively working on right now. I just feel like they're increasing, and maybe that's just my own sense of it. So recycling and then increase, maybe it's enforcement on property maintenance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Werka.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Recycling, we are looking at the program as it currently exists. It's a big financial consideration because recycling costs quite a bit more per ton than trash does. And so we're looking at a way to take those costs into consideration and how to effectively recycle or deliver our community's recyclables to the location in Oberlin without penalizing ourselves. So we are, it's a lot of information, there's a lot of things to consider. So we are continuously working on that. I've met with Lorraine County Solid Waste a couple of times, and we're talking about options and trying to find the best one for the city of Elyria going forward, because it is a significant cost and it's a significant undertaking for our sanitation department. But I anticipate in the near future, but I want to be able to answer the question before I bring it to you, quite frankly, and we're still exploring options. The hoarding property maintenance, I was aware of the one, and then the one today that you sent. I'll check in with Assistant Safety Service Director Leshin for the other 2 and find out the status of them and ask him to reach out and give you an update. But I agree, those are, a lot of times when you start seeing that type of condition at a property, it's a sign of bigger issues. And so you can visibly see something on the outside about the way the property is being maintained. It usually is a sign there are significant other problems going on inside of the property. So it is a good opportunity for us to make contact and maybe learn more.
Mr. Lippian?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President. It'd also be a good opportunity to see if they can get access to mental health services, because obviously that's linked to other problems. But question for you, I did run across a few residents today that had concerns about recycling. I'm glad to hear that you're having a conversation with Solid Waste. I think it'd be great to get them in here to do some education. For example, it's not widely known that if you throw your plastic bag with your recycling in it into the recycling container, you just nullified the entire recycling container. I don't know how many people know that, but you should take your bin and just dump the recycling out and keep the bag out of the equation. Ditto with pizza boxes, they don't get recycled, just little things like this. So my question is, either can he come in here and do some education, or can we do some education and outreach through maybe a water bill or something? Hey, these are the top 5 infractions we see on recycling. No pizza boxes, no plastic bags. I bet we'd at least see a significant percentage increase in what we're bringing back from the recycling program if we do a little bit of easy education like that. I'm wondering what you think about it.
Through you, Mr. President, I agree. That's part of what we're working on, how we're going to recycle, and then educating people as to how. And what is, that's exactly the conversation we had with Republic. It's an approach that Oberlin took, unbeknownst to us, but I suggested, why don't we tell them the 10 things that we want the most and tell them don't give us the rest. You're right, and also they say keep it loose. They want it loose in your can. You're absolutely right, and that's something I didn't know, because back in the day it used to be like you'd use the grocery store bags, right? And you'd separate them. Here's my plastics. Here's my newspaper. Here's whatever. They don't want that. That actually is a bad thing now. So they want it loose in the can. You're 100% correct. We're working on decals that would go on the can, right on the lid, so that right before you put it in, there's a reminder of the top 10 things that we want. We've also included notes as to whether they have to be cleaned out, that kind of stuff. So we intend to educate using social media, local press, every other resource that we have, as well as giving some immediate reminders there, and communicating through utility bills, all that kind of stuff. We are putting together a comprehensive plan as to how we're going to recycle, but also what needs to be recycled. And I hope to have that when it's ready, quite frankly. I don't want to roll it out too soon, because it's a lot to communicate to the community as well. And so we want to make sure we have it all lined up so that it's communicated well.
Mr. Lippian?
Through you, Mr. President, do we have an estimated goal month that we want to roll this out?
Through you, when it's ready. So no, I don't have an estimated date. There's a lot of information that we're gathering and a lot of people we're communicating with. And so, yes,
Can we confirm it might be this year at least?
that is the plan, yes.
Okay, good, thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Callahan?
Yeah, through you, Mr. President. Currently, as our recycling stands now, what would you say, if you do know, what percentage that is collected is actually recycled?
I don't know the exact percentage, but we're not doing very well.
Okay. Okay.
We have a lot of room for improvement.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Lippian?
Thanks. I just had one more thing to say. Unless I'm mistaken, and I could be, properly recycled material in the city of Elyria actually brings a little bit of money back to the city, correct? Properly recycled.
In regards, through you, Mr. President, in regards to grants and whatnot, the solid waste stopped giving grants a couple of years ago. We used to get upwards of $100,000 a year in grant money through solid waste. That stopped several years ago. So we get no financial benefit from solid waste when it comes to recycling.
Well, maybe we can find some creative incentives. Thank you.
Any other questions for the Safety Service Director? Thank you. Finance Director Plesky.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd just like to let council know that the independent audit of the 2023 financial statements is completed. The single audit report has been submitted and certified to the Federal Audit Clearinghouse by the independent auditors and myself. So that is probably will be released by Columbus within the next few weeks. And I would like to thank council for their support and well wishes while I had my knee replaced. The plan is to have the left one replaced in September, so, but thank you.
We got any questions for the Finance Director? Thank you. Law Director Deary.
Good evening through you, Mr. President. Just a few things. Our construction in the office, for those of you who have stopped by, it's still ongoing, but at least I'm told it's getting better. But if you are trying to get a hold of us, by all means, you can call, you can email. It would be helpful, at least I think to some of you, to call ahead, even if you are in the parking lot, just so you can find out where, depending on who you're looking for, you can locate us, because we have, some of us have been tucked into temporary offices in the space, et cetera, while the floors and such are getting done. It is a good thing. What's been done so far looks really, really nice, so we are excited, but that being said, we'll be excited when it's all done as well. Margaret O'Brien, who has been with the city, with the Law Director's Office for a little over 5 years now in a part-time capacity. She's been doing workers' comp primarily, will be full-time with us starting Monday the 15th, which is an exciting thing. She's got a lot of diverse experience. She's served as law director in neighboring communities. She's done criminal prosecution, and she will be continuing to handle our workers' compensation cases. So I'm excited for that to happen. You'll be seeing more of her, and that's all I have.
Any questions for the Law Director? Thank you. Elyria Police Department, Chief Pelko.
Good evening. Just wanted to give you an update. Unfortunately, we had to go to a fatal accident yesterday at State Route 57 and Abbey Road. The non-at-fault party involved with that did not survive the crash. We're still investigating it. It appears that the at-fault driver was under impairment for the accident, but we're still compiling some evidence and possible charges against him will more than likely be coming. So. With that said, I also want to announce that Casey Carty, he's a FBI special agent who's been working out of our police department for several years, is retiring. We're going to have a little celebration for him on Thursday to thank him for all his hard work he has done for us. You're all more than welcome to show up and wish him farewell in his retirement. Our armored vehicle is in. It is over the 500-mile mark, so I will need permission or approval from you guys to travel to Massachusetts for us to go get that vehicle.
We can take care of that now. Could I get a motion for what's being requested by the chief?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Lippian, second by Ms. Swerka. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Continue on, Chief.
All right, thank you. And the last thing I have is Sergeant Varga, who's in charge of our specialty events and planning and all of that. We have a school for him in Florida that we would like to seek permission and approval for him to go as well. It's 500 miles away. It's a 3-day conference in Florida in November that he'll be attending on how to properly plan and prepare for special events.
Very good. So we have a second request. Can I get a motion? So moved. Moved by Mr. Schneider.
Second.
Second by Mr. Oswald. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
Question's been called. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
That's all I have. I'll entertain any questions at
Any
this time.
questions for the chief? Mr. Werka? Oh, sorry. Mr. Oswald?
Thank you, Mr. President. Comment. Publicly thank Captain Welsh for the help he has given me in the last few issues. I'm going to say it, you know what it is, but we had one corner where nobody wants to stop, and they set up for about 4 days, and they wrote 90 tickets, okay? They recently were over in the area down Washington Avenue to Gulf Road on Lake Harrison, Columbus. They had a few guys over there. I don't know how that one ended up. I appreciate working with them, and when I've mentioned them, problems in certain areas, if you can target times for him when this is going on, they don't have to be watching the whole time, but they can hopefully do a good job in a small amount of time. I appreciate that. I'm sure the people that are getting the tickets aren't appreciating it, but we're doing it to save these crashes and these accidents, and I think you probably have the numbers that can say, you know, we're doing a better job in the city with accidents and things because we are watching that. So I just wanted to say thank you very much.
I will pass it along. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Werka?
Through you. 2 questions. FBI's had somebody in the department for a number of years. Will there be a replacement?
So we currently have 2 along with Casey, and we're working on getting him replaced. His boss is actually coming tomorrow. We're going to have that discussion.
And through the chair, when does the CALIA certification need to be redone? Or has it recently been re-upped?
We're in the process of doing that right now. We had Zoom meetings today with the CALIA personnel on certain policies and procedures to get our renewal.
Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Schneider?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Chief Pelko, is there any progress with the FBI training facility or update?
Yeah, so engineering is doing that. I think they have the building pads started. I still think they're still waiting for completion of the mechanical drawings as far as that goes, and that's one of the topics we're going to talk tomorrow with when the FBI come in to establish where we're at with that building as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Lippian?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Chief, where are we at with recruiting?
So we have 29 officers on our list right now as we speak. We're at 83. We're budgeted for 90. So we're currently conducting background investigations on those applicants, and hopefully the academy starts in October, so hopefully we can have some hired by October.
Do you think it's possible we'll hit that 90 goal?
Keep my fingers crossed. I'm hoping.
There you go. Thank you.
Ms. Mitchell?
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to Chief Pelko. I think it's great that you're targeting that one area, but I'll put my hand up and say, come sit on Gateway Boulevard. Come sit on Bullocks Parkway. I watched them sit at the light, look both ways, and take off. So if I could get a cop over there to sit and watch, we could probably do more tickets.
We'll do. We'll get somebody over there.
Any other questions for the chief? Mr. Lippian?
Actually, I had a question. Have you ever thought of working with the Ohio Highway State Patrol on this?
We have done several operations with the Ohio State Patrol on weekends and stuff, like a saturated patrol for these kind of things. Yes, we have.
Because they do have an airplane.
We've borrowed the helicopter from them at one point, yes.
Okay, great.
Yep. We work with them.
Is there any other discussion or questions for Chief Pelko? Very good. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Leader Fire Department, Chief Pernesti.
No report, but since he's so busy, I'll drive down.
Thank you. Any questions for the chief? Let's see, this looks like Mr. Schneider, engineering.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to update council on a couple projects. The East Side Relief Sewer, that's the deep dig that we've been doing. Obviously, all the pipes done. Now we're in the restoration phase. Later on this week, possibly early next week, we will be shutting Poplar Street down in front of Elyria Catholic. Before we do that, we will make sure that Gulf Road is open two ways up to at least Dilworth. So you'll be able to go around that section by using Dilworth, if not a couple other lanes as well, or other streets as well. They're out there actively paving Gulf Road right now and some of the other areas, so they're getting that taken care of. So hopefully the weather will hold off and we'll be able to knock that out and get them out of here sooner than later. But so they're actively working out there on that. East Broad Street, next week they're going to start the excavation again from South Logan toward South Abbey Road. So traffic in that area will be impacted. They will maintain traffic as much as possible, especially for like the Dunkin' Donuts. There's another business that is one way in and out, so we'll do our best to make sure they stay open as much as possible. They're working on the traffic lights, paving hopefully out there. The next phase of the paving will start in 2 to 3 weeks, but their subcontractor who's doing the work for them, they've been very, very busy. They're the same ones that are doing Gulf Road right now, so it's been a challenge between the weather and a lot of the projects that are going on out there. Cleveland Street project, they're continuing on with that as well. Concrete curbs up and around the Gulf Road area have been, or they're looking to install those if they haven't been installed yet. They're working on the traffic lights, as well as they should be putting asphalt down along the main stretch of Cleveland Street within the next week or so. So we should see a lot of activity out there as well. And then the street resurfacing, I heard word today that they're looking to start possibly next week in some areas. I don't have the exact locations they're looking to start at this time, but they do plan. That's just the asphalt roads only. We're still in the process of bidding out the concrete portions of the resurfacing. So I guess with that, if council has any questions.
Mr. Oswald?
Through you, Mr. President. So on Poplar, that's going to be full cutout, all curbs, and then are they going to also do the aprons on that time?
Yes, so they're going to rip out all the curbs, put under drains in, pretty much similar to what you see to the east of there. The only thing different is we're not doing sewer work. So it's basically a replacement of the road.
Thank you.
And aprons.
Ms. Sawerka?
Thank you, through the chair. South Abbey between Broad and University is on the OWDA plan, right? Or
Ohio Public Works.
Public Works. That will be done approximately or get started, do you have any idea?
We haven't bid it out yet.
Okay.
I sent an email today to Ohio Public Works because we're still waiting for the agreements to be signed by the mayor's office. I think they might have the wrong email address still again in their system. So as soon as we get that corrected and the mayor signs off on those, we'll have it bid out right away.
Through the chair, that's fiscal year '24 though, still?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
and then one follow-up to that, will the Broad Street intersection be completed before they start the South Abbey from Broad to University? Because that would be a nightmare.
It should be. They're anticipating finishing the East Broad Street, if everything goes perfectly, by around early September. So that's the plan they're hoping, but once again, weather and everything else behind it, you never know. But we haven't bid out South Abbey yet, so that typically, you're talking another month before we bid it. Then it usually takes another month before they start, so that'll put you right about the same time that one would end when the other one might start if that contractor's ready.
Thank you.
Mr. Schneider, did you give a projection on Cleveland Street completion?
The contractor out there is not moving at the fastest pace, unfortunately, but they don't have as much work to do as, obviously, the East Broad Street project. And I would anticipate they will take the entire time to finish the work, which will probably be early November.
And then to follow up with Chief Pelko's comments, can you just give us a broad brush of the FBI facility What's been completed to date?
Kathy in our office has been largely working on this. One of the holdups we've had is, building the pads out there, so we're getting a lot of materials. Part of the FBI facility, instead of paying to have all the dirt brought in, we have projects where we get dirt, so we're utilizing that to offset the cost so that we can use those other FBI dollars toward building more things and putting in more toys for the chief to shoot at. So that's the plan, as well as, just so the Cleveland Street, the plan is also to try to open up sections as they come available too. So once the Poplar light, the traffic light at Poplar Street is complete, they will be able to resurface that area and paint it. So there's a lot of moving parts that have to happen in order for certain areas to open up, so.
Ms. Mitchell?
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you, I know the last thing anybody wants to hear is about more construction. I know that on the residential streets, we've gone out to bid.
Yes, for the asphalt portions, yes,
Thank you. Any idea when they might start on that?
next week.
Awesome.
That's the
Thank
plan.
you. Thank you.
Mr. Lipia?
Thank you very much. Are you doing that little sliver of Miami?
I'll tell you right now, we don't have, until we bid out the concrete portion, we're finding out there's a lot more work in those concrete areas than we anticipated. We don't even know if we'll be able to get all the concrete roads that we were hoping to get. So odds are Miami, no.
To be continued?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Meanwhile, about the sidewalk, or if you will, the shared use pedestrian path, as it's called, going down East Broad. I ask not just as a resident, not just as a councilman, but also as a resident, is there a certain amount of footage, I guess you might call it a right-of-way, that extends from the sidewalk into the, deeper into the resident's property that's allowable by the city to move earth?
Typically, when sidewalks are built, I don't know if you got my email that I sent you a little bit earlier. I know it was around 5 o'clock.
I did.
or
It was
something.
very detailed, so I'd like a
So typically-
condensed Reader's Digest version.
Typically, when you put a sidewalk in, you try to put it 1 foot from the right-of-way line. It doesn't always go in that way. Sometimes contractors go out there, they rip out the old one, they put the new one in, they don't really worry about as long as it's roughly in the same location. So I don't know what happened, for instance, in Mr. Ball's location, he's a little bit wider on that side, it looks like, than it is, let's say, maybe on the other side of the road. So it just depends on how the sidewalk meanders, but typically, we like to keep it within a foot of the right-of-way line.
Yeah. Actually, I think that email came from Farkas, but that's something that's good to communicate to the residents, because they might express some shock when they notice that there's a little bit of footage into their property from the shared use path, because the messaging to them before the project began was you won't lose any of your front lawn. So when they see that, they don't know that you have a certain amount of allowance. So being able to communicate that to the residents might be a proactive step we can take to get ahead of complaints before they occur.
Well, I know just speaking from myself, when I talk to them, I always say right of way. I don't ever use their property line because I don't know exactly where their property line is, and it's not something that's you just walk out there and find without knowing where the pins are, so if there are pins. But yes, I mean, I try to relate that. Maybe everyone doesn't understand, the lingo of engineering and whatnot, and it might,
Understandably so. It's opaque. So just like I said, going out of your way to do some customer service and communicate to the residents to just get ahead of the shock factor would be a good measure.
Mr. Oswald?
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I thought Mrs. Werka was going to bring this up, but do we know anything yet about our bridges that we're supposed to get? Railroad bridges?
At this time, I do not, and I have not learned anything new. As far as I know, it's still on pace to bid later on this year and with construction to start next year. I have not seen final plans other than the one little piece of paper that they sent me, just snippet.
Mr. President, and I just wanted to say, I've grown up on East Broad Street, okay? And I still own the house, so it's been 65 years. And if anybody doesn't appreciate what that street's gonna look like, it's gonna be incredible. I don't even drive down part of it, and it's already looking so great. We are so fortunate to finally have it done. Yes, it's been a pain in the butt, but it's gonna be beautiful. just like East River, coming in from out of town in, there was a lot of comments on people saying that they didn't want it and this and that. And you drive that street, it's one of our prettiest streets. So I know it's been a pain, but we got some gain. Thank you.
Yeah, very good. All right, thank you. Mr. Lippian?
I just quickly want to echo that. Yeah, I voted for it. I think it's a good project. But just like when you sign with a doctor that he tells you, hey, I'm about to do this, I'm about to do that, you might feel this, communication's a good idea.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
President's referrals and remonstrances. Item number 1, Community Development and Finance. Item number 2, Finance. Item number 3, Finance. Item number 4, Finance. Item number 5, Utilities and Finance. Item number 6, Utilities and Finance. Item number 7, Utilities. Item number 8, Utilities. Item number 9, Utilities. Item 10, Utilities. Item 11, Utilities. Item 12 we'll take care of later on in the meeting. And item 13 is strategic planning. Items 14 through 17 received and placed on file in the clerk's office. Petitions and remonstrances from the lobby.
We have several. Carol Russo, 724 Kent Circle. Subject is parking ban. Time away.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President, and I want to thank...
Excuse me, Ms. Russo, if you please could
Oh,
state
I'm
your name and
sorry.
address for the
I've never
record.
done this.
It's
Yes.
okay.
Carol Russo, 724 Kent Circle, Elyria, Ohio. I want to thank you. I wanted to speak about a parking ban on the fire hydrant side of the street, citywide for the city of Elyria. Our children live in communities that have this ban. It's for the safety and security of our neighborhoods. I happen to live in the Heights where there are many, many cars, and they park directly across the street from each other, and you have a horrible time trying to get down the street. This was really brought to a head a couple weeks ago. We had an estate sale in our neighborhood for 2 consecutive weekends, and there were large trucks, vans, and all kinds of vehicles parked on both sides of our street, blocking everybody's driveways, blocking the mailboxes, and they're perfectly legally parked. And we were held hostage in our neighborhood for 2 weekends, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And I think that it's time for us to take a proactive stance and look at what other communities have done. North Ridgeville, Rocky River, where our children live, Avon Lake, even the city of Lorraine has banned parking on the fire hydrant side of the street. If your loved one needed an ambulance, emergency vehicle, your house was on fire, you would want for those emergency vehicles to be able to get to your residence, get to your loved one, save your house, without having to plow through the cars that are parked on both sides of the street, blocking the way. So, that's my spiel.
Very good.
Thank you.
Ms. Russo, we'll take that under advisement. Obviously, it's been referred to the administration. We'll look into that as far as what we can do for those measures. Appreciate you coming up.
Dawn Guanajuato, 311 Gulf Road, Elyria, and general comments.
That's not what I wrote, but okay.
Very good. Please state your name and address for the record.
Dawn Guanajuato, 311 Gulf Road. Who could have predicted that we'd be a budget shortfall next year, and so is Elyria School? Me, I could. 2 years ago, 4 years ago, I could have told you this was coming. And you guys want to up taxes and do this, that, good luck. Because I think in the next few years, you're going to see, like we did in '08, and you're going to see a lot of vacant houses and people leaving their houses because they simply can't afford their houses. And by you guys upping their taxes, that's not going to make it any better, especially for the elderly people who are on fixed incomes, several of which my dad's talked to in the neighborhood and they've already had to go bankrupt because of all this fun. You talk about fireworks and you guys are, cracking down on them. and why we didn't see so many. That's not why I think we didn't see so many. I think people don't have money. I think people only really blew them off on the 3rd and the 4th because they had to save them for that day, because normally, in the years past, we'd be seeing them the whole week. I'd hear them every night. My dog would have been freaking out every night. So really, it's about money. People don't have it. But yet you guys want to keep finding ways to charge us more. And you think that that's going to make us better, and somehow that's going to fix the problems. Just keep, well, we'll see if we can get a grant. Where does grant money come from? The government, right? And they're just printing money, making our inflation going through the roof. So we think by getting more money from the government, spending more money for the government, that's somehow going to make our inflation go down? No. Inflation's only going to go down one way. Stop spending. Reel in the budget. I'm sorry, but you're going to have to make these hard decisions sooner rather than later. The stupid waste management stuff with the recycling, then get rid of it. You know people aren't going to do, oh, well, we're going to tell them 10 things to do. And this. You think people are going to listen? Come on. We live in Elyria. We know we got some good residents, and we have some real crap residents, and they ain't going to listen. They're not going to listen. It's just going to keep costing you money. If it's costing us money, I like recycling. Don't get me wrong. I like reusing. I take your trash. I take your dressers. I take your nightstands. I refinish them while you guys throw them away. So I'm not opposed to it. I just think if it's costing us fucking money, get rid of it. Get rid of it. Start making the hard decisions sooner rather than later. Don't sit there and circle jerk the city and tell them what a great job they did when it's their job to clean up. Stop telling people what a great job they did for just doing their job. It's pathetic. The Chestnut Commons, fucking ridiculous.
Hey, did you just say that?
Fine, ridiculous, sorry. It's ridiculous. You guys, people come here, they sat there, residents complained, told you not to put all these there, told you not to put sheets there. You guys waited the vote for, what, 2-3 weeks? And then as soon as people start complaining, you vote it right through. Who's ever gonna go downtown? Who's ever gonna go by the mall and actually fix or put businesses over there when you just keep letting them build new? Because you know it's gonna be, you know what you do with old properties. It's not fun to renovate them. Who likes old properties? Who likes to renovate them? I do. I take the time to refinish woodwork. I take the time to make them back the way they were, because that's what I like. But most people aren't gonna do it. They're just gonna build new, because that's what we do now, the cheap, easy way, the plastic way. And why things keep going up, you guys think that this is gonna get better? Have you been to Home Depot yet lately? My Polly's $70. My stain went from 7 to 12. Get real with yourselves. And
Yes.
stop sitting there acting like you guys do a great job when you don't. I know my time is up. I'm done. Oh, yeah. And
Thank you for your
Maui,
comments.
Maui, still screwed. And they can do that to us anytime.
Thank you for your comments.
Anthony Twine, 247 Harvard Avenue, subject adult use marijuana.
Welcome. Please state your name and address for the record.
Yeah, Mr. President, my name is Anthony Twine. I live at 247 Harvard Avenue. I kind of feel like I just got set up here because what I really wanted to talk about was the tax revenue from the adult use marijuana. I know there's a moratorium on now. And I've been hearing about budget shortfalls all night. So I was wondering if you guys might consider the tax, revenue coming from that, and take the moratorium off, because it will absolutely help the city. And it's actually a wave that's coming. It's not something that we can say we don't want it, stick our heads in the sand. But people are gonna, if they don't buy it here, they're gonna buy it somewhere else. They live here, they're gonna bring it back here, and they're gonna smoke it. So why not take the tax revenue and be a little bit farther ahead with that? That's my comment.
Thank you for coming up.
All right, sure.
Chase Ferris, 715 Eastern Heights Boulevard, Save Our Children.
Welcome. Please state your name and address for the record.
Trying to get my. All right. Chase Ferris, 715 Eastern Heights Boulevard, Elyria, Ohio. Well, they have a whole thing to read, but we can kind of just. I'll relax on the reading. Over the last 3 years, we've really been trying to push this Oakwood project. We've been trying to figure out how the city, and the nonprofit Save Our Children would be able to make this relationship work, to be able to give this property new life. Oakwood, I believe 3 years ago, was occupied by students. I actually was a student at Oakwood a while ago, but still went there. As the community began to dry out, people began to move, Oakwood the population began to lower. As it began to lower, the schools decided to build new. For us, I guess it kind of goes into the situation. We want to renovate. The space there the space that we'll have there, the opportunity that we'll have there, both as a nonprofit and as a city, to be able to bring together people of all generations into one space to where they can coexist. It's putting us on the forefront of something remarkable. However, it is just going to take teamwork. To get us to this point, it's taking a tremendous effort from multiple individuals in this room to help us get here. But as we continue to move forward, if that be the case, as I'm all for it, we're going to have to continue to have teamwork. To be able to lean on each other. To be able to come together as a community to do something that, quite frankly, hasn't been done here yet. I've seen multiple models in various cities like Chicago, Columbus, even Oberlin to a certain extent. But for now, it's going to take us. For all of us to come together, to be able to make that stand and really just pour into our youth, but not just our youth. Pour into all citizens and be able to make a multi-generational community impact center. It's something that we can sit back and say, hey, we were a part of that. Something to leave for someone else. It's a part of our legacy as a city of Elyria, and Save Our Children. So that's my piece. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Mr. Ferris, for coming up. Appreciate you.
You have a good one.
That's all the petitions from the lobby.
Petitions and remarks from council members.
They're done.
Reports of standing and special committees.
They're done.
Resolutions, first reading.
Sponsored by Finance, a resolution approving a list submitted by the Safety Service Director for the collection of delinquent inactive utility accounts and directing the Clerk of Council to certify said accounts to Lorraine County Auditor.
Mr. Tolet.
Mr. President, I ask that this resolution be passed in its first reading under suspension of rules.
Second.
Second by Mr. Snyder. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Resolution 2024-20. Sponsored by Finance, a resolution finding that the city has unfit for municipal use certain city property.
Mr. Tolet.
Mr. President, I ask that this resolution be passed in its first reading under suspension of rules.
Second.
Second by Ms. Davis. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Resolution 2024-21. That's all resolutions first reading.
Resolutions second reading.
There are none.
Resolutions third reading.
There are none.
Ordinances first reading.
Sponsored by Finance. An ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director of the City of Elyria to dispose of city property that is unfit for municipal use.
Mr. Tolet.
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed in its first reading under suspension of rules.
Second.
Second by Ms. Davis. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2024-109.
Is that Ward 11?
109.
109, thank you.
Sponsored by Community Development, an ordinance accepting the dedication of certain lands, easements, and rights of way for the installation of streets and utilities is provided for the final plat of Eaton Point Drive and declare an emergency.
Mr. Callahan.
Mr. President, I move that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules and declare an emergency.
Second.
Second by Ms. Mitchell. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2024-110. Sponsored by Community Development. An ordinance accepting the dedication of certain lands, easements, and rights of ways for the installation of streets and utilities as provided for in the final plat of Ridgewater Subdivision Phase 6.
Mr. Callahan.
Mr. President, I move that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules.
Second.
Second by Ms. Mitchell. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2024-111. Sponsored by Community Development and Finance. An ordinance adopting the Elyria Architectural Design Rendering Financial Support Program.
Mr. Callahan.
Mr. President, I move that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules.
Second by Mr. Schneider. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2024-112. Sponsored by Finance. An ordinance amending ordinance number 2024-46, known as the 2024 Permanent Appropriations Ordinance, to change funds in various accounts.
Mr. Tolet.
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed in its first reading under suspension of rules.
Second.
Second by Ms. Davis. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2024-113. Sponsored by Utilities. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into an amendment number 11 to the agreement with AECom Technical Services, Inc. for management services for the City of Elyria wastewater pollution plant consolidation, weather plan, and declare an emergency.
Ms. Mitchell.
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules and declared an emergency.
Second by Ms. Davis. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2024-114. Sponsored by Utilities and Finance. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to apply to the state of Ohio for Round 39 grant and/or loan funding administered by the Ohio Public Works Commission for repair, reconstruction, and resurfacing of certain roads in the city of Elyria, authorizing the acceptance of said grant and/or loan if offered, providing local funds as necessary to complete said projects.
Ms. Mitchell.
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules. Second.
Second by Ms. Davis. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2024-115.
Point of order, Mr. President.
Yes.
On that ordinance, could we get a copy of Exhibit A, which was not attached to the legislation? Thank you.
There's no good reference. Today reference. For this one we just called.
14.
Number 11.
Item 14.
14 on the agenda. Yeah, where's the exhibit? Through you, Mr. Chair, Engineer Schneider, do you have an Exhibit A for the Round 39 grant?
The only thing I provided was the original referral that had the information attached to it,
All right.
but I can provide the Exhibit A if you'd like.
Through you, Mr. President, I'm marking the exhibit as, or excuse me, the original referral as Exhibit A, which will be attached to the original ordinance. Eric, I'm sorry. We'll make copies to provide to everyone.
Good, thank you.
All right, moving on.
Yep.
Sponsored by Finance, an ordinance authorizing the Finance Director to create 3 new capital project funds and declare an emergency.
Mr. Tolet?
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed in its first reading under suspension of rules and declared an emergency.
Second.
Second by Mr. Schneider. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2024-116. Sponsored by Utilities, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the Abbey Road South resurfacing project and declare an emergency.
Ms. Mitchell?
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules and declared an emergency.
Second.
Second by Ms. Davis. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2024-117. Sponsored by Utilities, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the Furnace Street resurfacing project and declare an emergency.
Ms. Mitchell?
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules and declared an emergency.
Second.
Second by Ms. Davis. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2024-118. Sponsored by Utilities, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the Midway Boulevard resurfacing project and declare emergency.
Ms. Mitchell?
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules and declared an emergency.
Second by Ms. Davis. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2024-119. Community Development and Finance. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement for the sale and state for city-owned real property, 925 Spruce, Elyria, Ohio, to Save Our Children of Elyria, Inc., and declare an emergency.
Ms. Mitchell.
Mr. President, this ordinance on its first reading under suspension of rules and declared an emergency. Second.
Second by Ms. Davis. Is there any further
Question.
called on the suspension? All those in favor saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Ordinance 2024-120. An ordinance authorizing a memorandum agreement with the Elyria firefighters, IAFF, Locals 474, and declare an emergency.
Board Director Deary.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President. The administration has requested that, with respect to this matter, that we would go into executive session to discuss collective bargaining matter. And due to that, I would ask that council consider that and we would take a vote by roll call vote should a motion be made.
Yep. Can I get a motion to go into executive
moved.
session for motion made by Mr. Tolet, second by Ms. Mitchell. Roll call vote.
Mr. Callahan?
Aye.
Mr. Armstrong?
Aye.
Mr. Oswald?
Aye.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Aye.
Mr. Stewart?
Aye.
Mr. Schneider?
Aye.
Mrs. Davis?
Aye.
Mrs. Sawerka?
Aye.
Mr. Lippian?
Aye.
Mr. Tolet?
Aye.
10 ayes.
Thank you. At this time, we're going to be going to executive session, so I'd ask the public to please step out.
Make sure your microphones are off.
Yep.
Good job.
Okay. We're good when you're ready.
Okay.
One more ordinance here. An ordinance authorizing memorandum agreements with IA 47 emergency.
Mr.
Yes, motion to MOA with the benefit of a committee report.
Through you, Mr.
Under
Sorry.
suspension of rules and declaring an emergency.
Motion by Schneider. Is there any question? Question called on the suspension. In favor signify aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2024-121. This is first reading.
Ordinance is second reading.
There are none.
Ordinance is third reading.
There are none.
Committee calls.
Community Development requests the Law Director, Safety Service Director, Building Inspector, and Engineer on Monday, 7/15, 6 p.m. Joint CD Finance requests the Mayor, Law Director, Finance Director, Safety Service Director, and Engineer on Monday, 7/15, immediately following Community Development. Finance requests the Mayor, Law Director, Finance Director, Safety Service Director, and Engineer on Monday, 7/15, immediately following the joint meeting. Utility Safety and Environment requests the Law Director, Safety Service Director, and Engineer on Wednesday, 7/10, beginning at 6 p.m. And Strategic Planning requests the Mayor, Safety Service Director, Finance Director, Law Director on Monday, 8/5, immediately following Council.
Anybody have any miscellaneous and unfinished business to talk about? Okay. Mitchell? We do that, we'll go out of the meeting, out of the full council, and then we'll go into strategic planning.
Seeing none, Mr. President.
Okay. Ms. Mitchell?
Seeing none, Mr. President, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion by Ms. Mitchell. Second by Mr. Sir. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
This meeting is adjourned. Okay, so we're going to go into and have a 5-minute recess, then we'll go into strategic planning.
You'll call, okay. Go ahead and leave the
So yeah,
record on.
so the clerks, could you please stop that, the meeting, I guess?
Yeah.
Mr. Stewart.
No, I know.
But it's confused the household, consolidation in this book. Mr. Parker?
My wife. Go ahead.
So, Mr. Parsons is not in town, I believe? That's what you So you reach out to Mr. Parker, and he can do it in his Mr. Parker would know I was assuming. Council, we did what we were supposed to do with the voting. No, I appreciate that. You're welcome. And I'm just. Oh, I understand. Trust me, I understand. One thing that I really needed. Mr. We'll just give it to Mr. Parker. Stanley, are you wanting to speak to me? Thank you. That has nothing to and what have they said? We don't have. So if you in the building department, that. I have no control over the pool. I don't even control that.
I'll reach out. Yeah, let's get a clear path.
How do you feel?
Okay, we're,
Through you, Mr. President, you call this committee meeting to order since
yeah,
we're adjourned?
we're going to call strategic planning order for the discussion of the moratorium, or actually, I'm sorry, I'm looking for my paperwork.
Okay, through you, the matter of adult use of marijuana facilities within the city limits is what we have on the agenda.
Yes, the matter of the adult use marijuana facilities within the city limits. So this is brought to my attention through Council at Large, Mr. Schneider, and others in regards to, I was out of town during this discussion in regards to the moratorium, but this is in regards to the facilities within the city limits. Away and kind of looking from this council, basically, on how we want to proceed or moving forward. So, is there anything more to that, or you want to have open debate in regards to what's...
Yeah, so Attorney Brunig is here, our zoning guru. So I asked him to passionately. Official Farkas is tomorrow, so he's not able to weigh in from the zoning and building department perspective. But in short, the city of Illyria's ordinances and zoning structure, like a lot of other communities, never contemplated and cannot facilitate adult use marijuana facilities at the present time. In order to accommodate them, we as a city, and notably you as the legislative authority, will need to pass legislation to allow them to legally operate here. So we can have some discussions on what that will look like, but my office needs some direction from you all as to what, if anything, what you desire to have happen with respect to adult use marijuana facilities. So that's where we are. And we obviously can help guide that discussion and shepherd, but really we can't go any further to get that legislation passed until we know where all of you stand collectively as a legislative body.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I've been very vocal on my position regarding marijuana. But in saying that and talking to the police, it's here the voters voted for it. So it would be my position to support the two facilities who have been licensed as medical marijuana facilities, lift the moratorium on them, and adopt the existing zoning regulations that we put in place for those, and we cap it at the two. And then we've got control of it. The police have inspected the new facility on Cleveland Street. They can begin the process then of potentially shutting down those that open up with not inspected product that they're selling to the public right now. And it's a way that we can move forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, through you, Mr. President, I just want to say I do believe that there are three, two that are dispensaries, one is processing, but that there are three facilities within the city. No, I just wanted, so we're all operating on the same page. We as a city have been notified that the facility on Sugar Lane has changed ownership. Mr. Brunig and I were speaking earlier that we will have to look further as far as what implications that may have on their conditional use that they received from the city, because it may very well be that their conditional use was specific to the ownership and did not transfer. So we would have to look at that. That's not saying that they couldn't continue to operate, but there might be some things that some steps that they would need to take under our ordinances, so.
Courtney, do you want to comment anything more on that, Mr. Bruning?
Just to reaffirm what Director Deary said, there are different types of changes of ownership. So our conditional use permits, the way we issue them under our zoning code, they're personal permits. So they are personal to the applicant. We issue them to a specific applicant for a specific use. If the applicant has changed, the use or the conditional use permit by its nature has lapsed. So she's correct in that regard, but we just don't know. We have heard secondhand, thirdhand that this may have transpired, but we don't know the format of the ownership change at this point, whether it was an asset or, or the membership or, shares of the facility actually changed.
Ms. Mitchell?
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to Law Director Deary or Assistant Director Brunig, has Sugar Lane, have they even applied or received the recreational license? Do we know?
I am not certain of that yet.
So, if I may, Mr. President, so why don't we give Nirvana, the Ponderosa place, that's what I'm going to call it, why don't we allow them to start operating, because they have their licensure for recreational and medical. Why don't we lift the moratorium for them, let them start operating, and work on finding out more about the sugar?
Through you, Mr. President, the issue is that even if we were to lift the moratorium, our ordinances, specifically our zoning code, do not allow adult use marijuana.
But couldn't we mirror the?
Yes, but we will have to go through that process. When our zoning code, the only reason we allow medical marijuana right now is through conditional use process, and our ordinances specifically reference revised code of Chapter 3796, which is specifically medical marijuana. So yes, we can go through that process if that is what you wish to do, but just so you know, and I'm not trying to discourage you, but this is not an overnight thing. To revise our zoning code, we need to go to Planning Commission. So this is a legislative process. This is to protect our residents, it's to protect the city, it's to, and it's also to instill a measure of consistency and equality. So yes, I understand that Nirvana has their dual licensure, and this is by no means disparaging them, but we can't say that, for instance, the facility on Sugar Lane is no less desirous or eligible or anything like that. So if you wish to cap the number in the city, you certainly can do that. If you wish to, that has been set forth in Ohio law. If you wish to say we don't want to have any more than what already exists, you can say that. But unfortunately, it is not as simple as saying, we're just going to lift the moratorium and let people do what they do, because the way the law is set up in the city, and it's not unique here, but in general, it's, if they were to just be allowed to operate, it would almost be as if a meat processing plant were allowed to operate in a residential area, because it is not zoned for that. The zoning is not there. So we would have to do the work, all of us collectively, to get that zoning in place. And we can make that happen, but it's not going to be an overnight.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Law Director Deary. So is there will we have a specific zoning classification that's called adult use marijuana, or is it something that just blankets over into like business general, light industrial, or is it it's a specific?
So a lot of it is again, what you all are comfortable with. For example, right now in our zoning, we have, for example, Chapter 734 is medical marijuana entities. We could go through the process of amending that.
We could amend that. We could add an additional chapter for adult use marijuana if we so chose. We did the medical marijuana, Chapter 734. We did that in response to the legislation that was passed in whatever it was, 2017, 18, allowing medical use marijuana throughout the state. But we added that chapter in addition to changing our zoning code. Chapter 734 isn't a zoning code provision. It's a business regulation provision. So we added another layer of local control on top of what the state departments had in place already. We were permitted to do that under Chapter 3796 when that was passed in the General Assembly. What the director is saying is, in addition to changing our zoning code, we might want to consider mirroring that state regulation with some local controls. We could do that. That is one option. One option is to just amend the definitions in our zoning code, not worry about any additional local controls, add those definitions, expand the definition of medical or just marijuana facility to include both medical and adult use. We could do that. We could add a separate conditional use permit for adult use. We could do separate zoning classifications for that. We have a lot of options here. Any of them, or all of them, I guess, are on the table, depending on how the 11 of you want to move forward. And as the director stated, no matter what happens, if you decide that you want these facilities in the city, we have to amend the zoning code in some form or fashion to permit them, to include them in definitions, to include them under conditionally permitted or principally permitted uses in whatever zoning districts you want. But that involves a referral to Planning Commission, a public hearing at Planning Commission, referral back to Council, Community Development Committee, and then a public hearing at Council through all of that. So that's not to say we're not willing to go through that process. We absolutely are, but we want to let you know that just lifting the moratorium isn't enough to get this moving. It won't happen tomorrow. This will happen a couple of months down the road because that's the process. That's what the charter requires. A referral to Planning Commission, public hearings there and at Council before any zoning changes are enacted.
Mr. Oswald?
Thank you,
Let's go
Mr.
to Ms.
President.
Swerka.
So I guess let's just say that we've got 3 that have medical marijuana right now, whether or not, okay. And if we just amend it to say that we change our zoning, that those 3 right now will make available, they could have a dual license. We say it right now, let's just say in a year, 2 years, 3 years, things are going good, and we're seeing that, a few more businesses want to come in, and they're doing a good job. Can we amend that at that point to say that now we can change, the legislation or the zoning so that it makes it capable for those others?
Those are kind of 2 different questions. You can decide in what zoning districts you want to allow these, and you can simultaneously put a cap on the number of them. And then you don't have to change necessarily the zoning districts that you want them, but you can raise that cap by amending that at a later time if you wanted to do that. You would still have the same limitations if you only wanted to have them in, say, light and heavy industrial areas. I'm just making that up. I don't know what you want. But if that were the case, you could keep that in there, but you want to cap it at 3, and then 2 or 3 years down the road, you want to say, okay, let's up it to 5 or 6. You could do that without changing the zoning code. That would be a legislative change that wouldn't necessarily invoke the zoning code and those processes. Then again, we might have an entirely different zoning code after the comprehensive land use and zoning update is completed, whenever that happens.
Ms. Soroka?
Thank you, through you. I think the first question has been answered. The first question is, what's the feeling of these 11 people up here? Do we want this or not? I think you've gotten a clear message with Mr. Tollett now on board that we want to do it. Okay, so that's been decided. It would be very helpful for us to have some sort of flow chart. Here's 3 choices. Here's 3 options. You can change this, or change this. I think, and if you do the zoning code change, you got to do these 5 steps. What you just answered, Mr. Oswald, was the perfect answer of they're in one location. Do we want them in the same neighborhoods? My vote would be yes. If we've got them on Cleveland Street, Sugar Lane, we don't want them then on, I don't know, Midway Boulevard or some other location. We would want them to be within a certain district.
But I
So-
think, may I? I'm
Yeah,
sorry, sorry to interrupt.
sure.
They would be permitted, as it is now, at Midway, because they are conditionally permitted uses now in BG, LI, and HI districts. We haven't had any over there. That doesn't necessarily mean we couldn't. Medical are conditionally permitted in those zoning districts.
Through the chair, I think it's almost impossible for us to sit here and say, we want this and we want that, because none of us have the zoning in front of us, and what's allowed and what's not. I think we have a general idea of what the process and the steps are. We know it has to have this many readings, and it has to go to planning commission, and you have to, the adjoining neighbors and all that. We have to go through that process, but we don't have that in front of us. And I understand, we can't just say no moratorium. The moratorium has to stay in place until we do these other steps. But I think moving forward, we've already given the clear kind of green light that we're okay with having recreational adult use marijuana in Elyria under restricted circumstances that probably mirror the medical side. But I think we need something in front of us to vote on, or to at least look at.
Well,
Law Director Deary.
through you, Mr. President, Councilwoman Soroka, I do agree with you, but with a couple caveats. So that's one big question that is answered. So yes, sounds like this group, we're good with moving forward. But I do think that my office, we need some additional information so that we would be able to give you a proposal, or I guess, several potential proposals. Is this group, and maybe you don't know this answer yet, and this is something that we would need to have further discussion about. Would you want to limit these facilities to only those facilities that have the dual use? So only ones that are medical and adult use combined? Or would you want to limit them to ones that already have their medical use and are getting their dual use, as we speak? As Mr. Oswald stated, this always could be revisited in a year from now, 2 years from now. As Mr. Brunig said, we can tell you right now that it is only through conditional use, so basically it's a case-by-case basis. These come before the city, so there's the opportunity, again, for planning commission, for committee, for full council to look at them and say, okay, have you met the criteria? That's the situation that it has been in place for the medical marijuana facilities. And is that what you would want to see for the dual use, if that's the way you want to go? Or are you okay with standalone adult use? Because that is also a possibility. I'm sorry, Mr. President, Mrs. Mitchell. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Law Director Derry. Mr. Lippian.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President. Well, first of all, I want to say the fact that we're here having this conversation is exciting. You know, that the residents of Elyria and Ohio decided to make a choice for liberty and against government paternalism so that we can even have this conversation is refreshing. Equally refreshing is Mr. Tollett's coming around on the issue marginally, as well as the law department's advancement of this subject without delay, which is very, very much what we expected, and I'm pleased to see that this is moving forward and with all due regard to our processes, but also not with a languid pace. That said, I concur with a lot of what Councilman Swierka said, and I do share the sympathies of Councilman Oswald in that we should have, as part of our options that we're looking at on the trestle board, if you will, at least one of the options having a mechanism to allow for conditional use or allowing another facility, because we don't know what the economic prospects are going to be in the future, and we don't know exactly what kinds of facilities might express an interest. So it would be nice to have, as one of the options presented to us, something that has an internal mechanism to allow council the ability to, case by case, potentially approve another one, perhaps in a certain zoning border. I think these are very exciting times, and I agree with Councilwoman Swierka. We should have a couple options. This reminds me of when we looked at the fireworks ordinance, in that it was a relatively uncharted territory for our city, and we looked at what other communities were doing. So I think it might be beneficial for us to take a look at what other communities are doing as we're drafting these, again, plans on the trestle board for us to consider.
Through you, Mr. I'm sorry, through you, Mr. President, if I may respond. I'm very cognizant, and I want to be very careful not to have my office unnecessarily narrow options for all of you. And that is very much why I'm looking for feedback from all of you. So I certainly appreciate that you're looking for options, but that is very much why I'm trying to look for feedback from all of you so that we are able to draft some options. Because, for instance, when I say, look, you know, are you, you know, would you consider standalone? If you're not, then obviously, then I don't need to, we don't need to prepare that as an option, because that would be potentially quite a bit more legislation. We would do that, but we don't necessarily need to go down that rabbit hole if that's not something that you would contemplate at this moment. If you're very much happy and satisfied with how, what the process is for the medical use facilities and the fact that we allow them with conditional use only in business general, in light industrial, in heavy industrial, and I can tell you that's been the case since 2017. Unfortunately, Mr. Farkas couldn't be here, but he will be back in town tomorrow, and he can tell you any sorts of issues that they've had. I am not aware of any, actually, as far as those entities that have gotten conditional use permits having any subsequent problems with them. I would encourage you all to speak with them. So, yes, we are more than happy, obviously, to present council with options, but you know, we need to obviously have some, you know, some tailored criteria in order to do so.
Ms. Mitchell?
Thank you, Mr. President, through you, that the voters of Ohio and Elyria passed this in November, and here we are in July, and we are just now having conversations about this. It's disheartening. But I will say this, if you take a moment and go to Nirvana, they will be happy to give you a tour. The state regulates this so strictly. They can't even get a license unless they jump through all of the hoops that the state has put forward. Nirvana is safe, is secure, is clean. So all we're saying is give them a chance to open their business. I mean, they're open on the medical side, but they have the recreational license as well. I mean, I'm not criticizing you all. I'm just saying we should have been working on this.
Through you, Mr. President, and I would say, At the end of the day, council's a legislative body. We're here to advise you, but I can't make the decisions for you. And I can't write something that I don't know how to write.
Give us some decisions to make, Law Director Deary. Mrs. Zaworka, I agree with her. Tell us what we need to do. Tell us what steps we need to take. We're more than willing to do
With all
that.
due respect, through you, Mr. President, I can't make the decisions for you.
We're not asking you to.
Okay.
We're asking you to give us direction.
With all due respect, if you tell us what I want, or tell us what you want, we will write it. If you write it, if you build it, they will come, we will write it. But at this point, I don't have answers from you in order to write it. And I apologize for my frustration, but that's where we are.
What we're supposed to ask.
Okay, all right. So we'll continue on with the conversation, but Mr. Schneider, I guess the goal here was today to have this conversation. And obviously, there's a lot of questions that still need to be answered and asked and tried to, if there's and I don't know if there's a template out there with other different communities, but I think ultimately, we all have to try to continue to work through this process, because, as Ms. Mitchell said, the voters did vote for this, and we try to expedite that because there's opportunities for Nirvana, so we speak to them just because, they're ready to go right now. So with that being said, Mr. Schneider, you can let you weigh in on your
Okay, so my biggest concern is getting the current medical facilities, their ability to open as a dual use. I think that's first and foremost, where we need to go with this is making sure they're on board, especially if they've paid the $7,500 to the state of Ohio. They're already licensed, they're already approved, they're following the laws of the state, they're getting inspected by the state. So that would be my, I think that's our first point of business we need to do is make sure that if they want a dual, we will allow them to have a dual use. As far as the cap goes, I don't know if I'm in favor of necessarily a cap for this reason alone, is geographically we have a little bit of a void. They're only to one end of town, and I think there's probably going to be potential interest for something a little more northwest, closer to the highway. I mean, that's just my honest opinion on that. So, but I think our first and foremost would be getting the dual use allowed for the existing facilities.
Ms. Davis, and then Ms. Sawerka, then Mr. Oswald.
Jared, so here's my thought, because we're going back and forth. Soon as we talk to Mr. Farkas about our zoning, I think we can move forward with our 3 existing to see if it's okay if we can, to move this to the Planning Commission. And I think, that is going to be, we got to know the zoning. You said that. So I think as soon as we talk to him about our zoning, an email can work to let us move forward, to move this into Planning Commission, and offer, so we'll be able to offer to the 3.
Real quick clarity, if we can do
The one's a
But we got the
processor.
processing plant. They're not
Through,
selling anything.
through you, Mr. President, the state specifies that if the processing that they want to offer for adult use, they will need to get new licensing. So I would,
I think they've done that.
but I would recommend that we would address them as well in our zoning.
Mr. Bruning, did you want to comment on that, or what Ms. Davis said? I didn't know if you wanted to weigh in on that at that point.
Well, I guess at this point, I mean, if we're talking about allowing the ones that have medical permits, I mean, that does give us a bit of a starting point in that someone, I think Mrs. Sawerka said something about mirroring the way we do medical marijuana. That at least gives me some idea. I mean, we'll have to obviously change the terminology and incorporate it into the code, but I think I know where you're going with that. So I think that's something we could start with. And again, maybe incorporating a cap. We're trying to figure this out, so that's.
Yeah. Ms. Sawerka?
Thank you, through the chair. I mean, that's exactly what I was trying to, I guess, ask for, is if we collectively have consensus, this is the direction we want to go in. We want to have it mirror medical marijuana. We already know that they have to adhere to all these state guidelines. Then I think what we need from law and building department is, here's what needs to be changed, moved, amended, in order to make that happen. I think that that's what we're all grappling with, because, yes, we say we want to make it the same. Okay, we need to do this, then this, then this. What are the steps? Because these are months in, planning commission and readings, and we're in summer recess. And I think then later on, we can tackle the other things like Mr. Oswald said. Well, do we want more? Do we want to change it? We can always do that. But if we're going to try to get started now, I think we need to know, what is it you need us to say yes to? That's the direction that we need.
And I think you just gave it to us, honestly. Let us worry about the process. We just wanted to know what direction to take. And I think that's been mostly provided.
Adopting medical zoning and allow the existing.
Okay.
Mr. Oswald?
I'm okay with that.
Through you, Mr. President. So, Mr. Snyder and a few of you made the great comments on how we should go about this. Would it help you, because right now, you were asking us, well, what do you want? Do you want this or do you want this? If you had a list of things that we could all get, we could fill them all out, and that would...
That's what we wanted.
I'm telling you, mark it up. Well, do we want 3? Do we want 10? Whatever. But the questions you keep asking right up here, if you give us a bullet of all these different questions, and that would give you some information to help answer some of your questions. Does that help?
Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Lippian, if you want to go first. Thank you. Through you, Mr. President, may I suggest, because as several of you have stated absolutely correctly, you can always start and say, look, we are starting with the premise, we're going to mirror what we already are doing with medical marijuana. We know that the facilities who already have their medical marijuana license, who have gotten their dual licensure to also deal, that's terrible to say, but adult use. We know that they've already gone through our processes, so they're zoned correctly with the medical marijuana, so they would also then be in the right locations for adult use. We can always build upon that in the future as these things unfold. So may I suggest that's where we would start. There will need to be a referral made to Planning Commission. That can be done by any one of you, it can be done by my office. We can get the ball rolling there. If you are so inclined, strategic planning could, we could have a committee report that's voted on this evening, and that would authorize us to begin the process to address the adult use facilities. Yes, and amend the relevant ordinances, including the zoning.
That's great. You just did it.
Mr. Lippian?
Thanks through you, Mr. President. Yeah, I think that the conversation is somewhat bounded in that, as you alluded to, Law Director Deary, it's pretty clear that the council's desire isn't to outright stop it from happening, and it's also not to let it happen without some controls. So I think that does put us in the zone of, as I'm hearing some people say, at least finding a way to move forward with what we currently have here in the city, and also creating a mechanism for potentially reviewing on a case-by-case basis sorry, it's a little distracting. It's okay. Other things as they come along. So at any rate, it would be good to have a flow chart, like Ms. Swierka said, or an option A, B, C, within that bounds of how do we take on new requests for facilities and still allow the great facilities we've got to go forward. Because as Ms. Mitchell said, it is true that it's taken us a long time to get notified that we needed to have a moratorium, but I will give the law department credit that once we did the moratorium, they have been taking all due diligence to get it settled. So it'd be nice to see us move in a good direction here after tonight.
Mr. Tolet, you want to weigh in on something more additionally?
I would like to make a motion then to forward. I would like to make a motion that council request that this be sent to mirror the medical marijuana zoning. Simple as that.
I don't know if that's what the law directors, are they're kind of crafting some type of language there, or if it's before you.
Through you, Mr. President, we're working on a committee report
Okay.
here, but that is kind of
Along
gist
the
of it.
same
Yes.
set of railroad tracks.
Mr. Schneider, you had another comment?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yeah, I think it's best if we do go this way with our currents. Also, I think that if I'm not mistaken, the timeline with the state, it may take a little longer on any new requests to be like underwritten and approved by the state going forward, so it may give us a little more time to look into the future, correct?
Through you, Mr. President, that's my understanding. Those facilities that already had their medical licensing were kind of at the first in line to have their dual use applications reviewed.
No. Mr. Lippian, did you want to add something more?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President, I just wonder if we might take a quick recess so the law department can draft a committee report.
You're free to,
I'm free to go.
you're free to go?
Well, I'll stick around. What else have I got to do
All
tonight? Talk about marijuana.
We're losing money. You got something?
Okay. Out of that healthy discussion, we have a committee report for consideration. For the adult use marijuana facilities within the city limits, amending relevant ordinances, including the zoning code to conditionally permit adult use marijuana in the same zoning classifications as the medical marijuana facilities, provided that such applicants have state dual licenses and referrals to planning commission. That'd be the correct way, that's how that was written?
Through you, Mr. President, yes. So this is just also will take care of the president's referral for
Right,
planning
Just
commission.
moving it forward that
Yes.
way. Okay. So there's a motion by Mr. Oswald, second by Mr. Schneider. Is there any further?
Question.
All those in favor by saying aye. Aye. Motion carried. We need a committee report before you leave. Ms. Mitchell, pass it on that way, and then please sign it, and then we'll work work it back this way. If there's no further to come before this council, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll motion. You could second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify. Aye. Opposed? Thank you.